She was just the quiet supplies sergeant they all ignored, until a single radio call revealed her secret past as a legendary shadow operative, long thought dead. Now hunted by the very tactics she created, she must outthink an enemy using her own playbook. This isn't just about survival. It's a final war between two ghosts. Welcome to my channel. They called me the filing cabinet in combat boots. I didn't mind it. Not really. Not until I saw my name on the deployment list. It was printed in neat black font, right there under Strategic Support Personnel, Forward Operations Team. One of the new guys from Bravo Platoon chuckled. "What's a supply girl doing on the mission board?" He joked to his buddy, jabbing a thumb at my name. "You think she's packing extra granola bars or what?" They all laughed. But 2 days later, no one was laughing. Not when enemy comms cracked through the radio like ice splitting. A voice, gravelly, panicked, spoke accented English, just 6 chilling words. "Is Falcon Indigo 9 on site?" Silence hit the truck like a dropped stone. Because that phrase, that call sign, it was never supposed to exist outside top-secret clearance levels. Not here. Not around these boys with jokes and shiny boots and zero context. And yet they said it. Falcon Indigo 9. That's me. I'm not supposed to exist anymore. My name's Dana Rios. 41 years old. Half Puerto Rican, half something that never mattered. I wear desert fatigues that haven't seen the inside of a press since Obama's second term, and I've been working in military logistics for 17 years, officially. On paper, I run inventory at Forward Base Magnus in northern Jordan. I oversee things like ammunition manifests, fuel allocation, and emergency supply drops for Black Ops units that don't get named in budget hearings. I distribute boxes. I don't fire rifles. That's the official story. Unofficially, I used to be a scalpel that left no scars. But that was a long time ago. It was never supposed to matter again. My job now is simple. I keep quiet. I count faster than most computers and track movement patterns on terrain maps like a hawk tracing thermals. I know the difference between a route that gets you there 10 minutes faster and one that gets you there alive. But I'm just the supply girl. The guys at the base call me Clerk Widow because I never laugh, never flirt, never stick around for beers. I don't share stories. I don't decorate my quarters. I don't keep pictures. There's a reason for that. They think I'm mourning someone. Maybe I am. Maybe it's just the woman I used to be. "Hey, Widow," that smug bastard Second Lieutenant Grayson used to call out during chow distribution. "Tell us another thrilling tale of water purification tablets and the noble saga of peanut butter MREs." Every time he said it, I handed him his rations without a word, without a flicker of emotion. Because if I showed emotion, I'd give too much away. Once, during a 0600 briefing, Grayson started pitching a new convoy route. Big smile, big gestures, called it Operation Time Saver. Said it would cut delivery to the outpost by 15 minutes. I looked at his whiteboard for about 3 seconds and said, flatly, "That route runs through Dakar, Washington. There are 3 natural choke points in that canyon, 2 of them with overhead blind spots. Perfect for IED setups. If they've been watching our drone patterns, they'll strike there." He laughed, just like always. "Thanks for the paranoia, logistics lady. Why don't you leave the strategy to the folks who passed officer school?" I just nodded, kept my mouth shut. Because here's what they don't know. There is no officer school for the things I've done. They don't know about my last real assignment, the one buried under 10 levels of clearance at the Pentagon. They don't know that for 6 years, I operated under a ghost designation, coordinating misinformation campaigns so precise they made entire enemy divisions collapse without ever seeing a bullet. I was extracted from that world after an incident no one's allowed to talk about. The kind of thing that ends careers or entire departments. They wiped my record down to nothing but a name, a birth date, and a clearance level marked compartmentalized. When I got transferred here, the CO, Captain Lyle, didn't even know who signed off on me. All he got was a memo with half the fields blacked out and a stamped line. Assignment made via Direct Strategic Operations Authority. No further inquiry permitted. I've spent the last 18 months being invisible. Until this morning. I walked into the command tent just after sunrise, same time I always do. I thought it was a standard deployment rotation, probably another convoy resupply to an outpost near Al Raqqa, until I saw the board. And there it was. Rios, D. 6th slot, under tactical support. Lieutenant Grayson burst out laughing. "Did someone screw up the paperwork?" he asked the room. What's she gonna do? Threaten the enemy with expired field rations? Another soldier chimed in. Bet she's bringing a crate of paperwork to the front. Ambush them with bureaucracy. No one asked me why I was listed. No one even looked my way, except Captain Lyle. He said nothing, but his eyes lingered just a moment too long. That was the first time I knew someone in that room might have guessed, might have remembered. I didn't say a word, just gathered the supply maps like I always did and walked out. But deep down, I knew. They'd pulled my name off the shelf. Falcon Indigo 9 had just been activated, and things were about to change. 2 days after the briefing, we rolled out. The convoy was 9 vehicles deep, 2 troop transports, 3 supply trucks, 1 satellite uplink unit, a recon ATV, a fuel hauler, and a Humvee carrying the officers. Grayson was sitting shotgun in that Humvee, riding high and smug like a prom king on a parade float. I was in the last supply truck, right where I asked to be. Because the rear isn't just the most vulnerable, it's also the clearest window into what's coming for you, especially when you're not supposed to be there. I had my tactical pad out, not that anyone noticed. The tablet looked like a clipboard, but the interface was homemade, jury-rigged from old software they thought was obsolete. And that was the point. No wireless signals, no data pings, just raw satellite map, overlays, and visual topography I could manipulate with a stylus. Grayson's shortcut route took us west of Azen Gorge. I'd warned him. I told him twice that it was an old kill box, last used during the 2014 border conflicts. A canyon with enough blind turns and vertical overhangs to hide a dozen RPG teams and their grandmothers. But Grayson had something to prove. Time matters, he kept saying. Logistics needs to move like the tip of the spear. No more molasses routes. I said nothing. What was I supposed to do? Show him my old credentials? Ask him if he wanted a bedtime story about how I once diverted an enemy armored battalion into a salt flat by planting 6 falsified weather reports? I watched from the rearview mirror as the walls of the canyon started to rise on either side. The sun disappeared in patches, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees in 5 minutes. Too quiet, I thought. My fingers tensed. I tapped the stylus against the pad, and the predicted threat areas lit up in red. 200 meters ahead, Grayson's Humvee rolled into one of them like it was cruising down a highway commercial. The first shot came from the north slope. RPG, angled low, fast. It didn't hit Grayson's vehicle, but it spooked the driver enough that he veered off into a rock ledge and cracked an axle. The Humvee went down in a spray of sand and steel. Then came the gunfire. It wasn't chaos. Not yet, but it was coordinated. Too coordinated. I dropped the clipboard and popped the back door. The convoy stopped moving. The sound of rifles cracked off canyon walls like bones breaking in slow motion. Contact right, came a voice over the squad radio. We're pinned. No one had planned for this. They were reacting, stumbling. Grayson's plan had assumed speed would save us. But I knew better. I'd learned the hard way that speed only matters when you're not headed into a trap. I didn't wait for orders. I stepped into the canyon floor and sprinted low and fast toward the rear transport team. Sand kicked up around me. I could smell burning rubber and diesel. The whole formation was stalled, boxed in. Rios, barked Captain Lyle, ducking behind the tire of a flipped trailer. What the hell are you? Listen later, I snapped, slamming the stylus back into his hand. They've got at least 2 fire teams with elevation advantage. One southeast bluff, one 30 meters north behind a false ridge. Tell second squad to flank west and keep low. He hesitated. Then he looked at the tablet. He saw the plotted overlay, the one I'd prepped the night before, just in case. Not because I'm paranoid, because I remember patterns. And this was textbook enemy ambush formation. Classic quadrant encirclement. Same damn tactic we used to run in deep field misdirection campaigns. I could practically hear the instructor's voice in my head. Let him come in close, then make him wish they hadn't. Where'd you get this map? He asked. I looked him dead in the eye. I drew it. He didn't ask another question. He issued the order. And within 3 minutes, second squad moved fast and quiet, looping west across the dead zone I'd marked safe. Sure enough, they came up behind the northern shooters just as they were reloading. The firefight ended almost instantly. The southeast team, seeing their buddies go down, retreated up the ridge. Our recon ATV tracked them past the crest, and when they reached the extraction slope, They ran straight into air support that had been on standby. Clean. No American losses. One minor injury from shrapnel. Grayson was evacuated back to base, red-faced, limping, and suspiciously quiet. The rest of us stayed behind to sweep the area. I walked the perimeter alone, looking for shell casings, burned wire, and scorched gravel. You can tell a lot by the debris left behind. What I found made my stomach turn. Encrypted comm links. High-grade ECM disruptors. Counter-tracking software. These weren't local insurgents with second-hand gear. They were trained, efficient, and they knew we were coming. We loaded back into the trucks at sunset. The radio stayed mostly quiet, just the occasional static from our rear scout vehicle. But then, halfway through the return route, the enemy comms came back. A new voice, one I hadn't heard in nearly a decade. Falcon Indigo 9, the voice crackled. We remember Alam Sector. We remember what you did to our staging line. You won't disappear this time. There was no mistaking it. They weren't targeting the convoy. They were targeting me. Lieutenant Harper, one of the recon officers, turned pale. Who were they talking to? I didn't answer. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a scorched, laminated ID tag, half erased, mostly blacked out. But in the lower corner were the faded initials. FI9, Falcon Indigo 9. Compartmentalized authorization, strategic warfare. Harper stared at it like it was an alien relic. You? Yes, I said. And for the first time in years, I let the weight of that title settle back onto my shoulders. I'm the reason their supply lines vanished in 17. I'm the ghost in their comms. I didn't come out here to be a hero. I came to hand out rations and stay forgotten. But they don't forget. They never do. The radio crackled one last time. Come out, Falcon. No more hiding. I clicked the comms off with a smooth motion and handed the headset back. Drive, I said, and no one questioned me again. Back at base, the silence was suffocating. They didn't hold the usual debrief in the tactical tent. Instead, I was escorted, quietly, no fanfare, to the operations room behind steel doors, the kind with double authentication locks and a clipboard no one ever signs. It wasn't until I saw the big table, hologram projectors off, old-school maps pinned to foam boards, that I realized someone had dug up a briefing room that hadn't been used since the Afghanistan drawdown. Captain Lal stood near the far wall, rubbing the bridge of his nose like a man trying to swallow three conflicting truths. Across from him, a man in civilian clothes tapped his fingers on a folder that had restricted stenciled across the top in big red ink. His suit was too clean, his silence too surgical. Intel, but not the uniformed kind. Sergeant Dana Rios, he said without looking at me. Or should I say, Falcon Indigo 9. Captain Lyle's head jerked up. I nodded once. The second one doesn't show up in HR records. He chuckled dryly. You'd be amazed what shows up in places it shouldn't when ghosts leave footprints. The enemy transmission confirmed they're aware of operations previously believed to be classified beyond all public records. You're worried they have more than just names, I said. You're worried they've got playbooks. He flipped the folder open. Inside were satellite photos, grainy, heat signatures, some in false color infrared. Movement across old routes in Syria. Communications logs dating back 3 weeks. Words I recognized. Coordinates I'd used. They're using your old models, Rios, he said. Modified. Messy, but close enough. Captain Lal stepped forward. How is that even possible? Those operations were compartmentalized beyond this chain of command. I don't even know what recurve ops are, and I'm your CO. I turned to face him. Because recurve wasn't an op. It was a doctrine. A playbook of destabilization tactics, misinformation, and real-time logistical manipulation. You make the enemy believe their own data is lying to them. You collapse the battlefield before they even see your boots. And you ran this? Lal asked, the words catching. No, I said. I was it. The intel man pushed the folder toward me. We've got an offer. Strategic advisory. You'll help us map their current infrastructure, what they've stolen from your playbook. You'll show us how to turn their version into a liability. I didn't sit down. I didn't need to. They're not improvising, I said. They're testing. Echo Sector, Alam, now this. They're using old corridors on purpose. They're trying to bait someone like me out of the shadows. The room went quiet, because they all knew what that meant. This wasn't about our convoy, or a hijacked route. This was about me. I closed the folder and turned to the map on the far wall. The roads looked different now, worn, scorched with memory. I could still see the places I disrupted years ago. Still remember the towns that went dark after we fed the wrong info into their logistics hub. They're betting we won't respond the old way, I murmured. That we'll try to hit them with precision drones and analytics while they're using analog deception. Well, I turned back to them. Let's disappoint them. They gave me the room. Not a metaphor. They cleared everyone out of the base's rear planning bay and handed me a table, stacks of old supply manifests, a topographic printer, and paper maps from before the satellite era. I unrolled a hand-drawn terrain map I'd kept folded in the false bottom of my footlocker for 9 years. It still smelled faintly of diesel. I took out a faded compass, the kind you use when the batteries fail and the signal dies, and set it next to a chipped mug of coffee. Then I started drawing. Not hypothetical supply routes. Not modern projections. No, I mapped their habits. The ghost teams reconstructed movement patterns. Where they'd stolen from recurve protocol. Where they'd deviated. Where they'd left behind too many footprints. After 4 hours, I had their skeleton plan pinned in red string and thumbtacks. Captain Lau returned just before midnight. He stood in the doorway, eyes scanning the paper terrain. I've never seen strategy like this, he said. You're not just guessing their moves. I'm teaching myself how they're thinking, I replied. That's how you beat your own reflection. He stepped forward and pointed to a mark labeled Ghost Loop 3. What is this? A false corridor, I said. They've mapped it as a supply weak point to lure us into protecting it. But the real target will be here. I tapped a blank area northwest. This hilltop isn't listed on most maps because it was leveled after the 09 drone collapse. They'll try to move mobile comms through here. If we let them. And if we don't, Lal asked, then they'll never get a chance to transmit again. The next day, we launched what the ops board labeled a logistics drill. But in truth, it was a trap. We fed them a fake route plan over unsecured channels, a fabricated weak point in our resupply schedule. We made it sloppy on purpose. We staged an argument over comms. We sent scrambled maps over visible frequencies. They took the bait. 2 days later, they showed up with a convoy of their own, disguised, quiet, hugging the terrain like shadows. Except we were already there, waiting. When it was over, not a single American casualty. 3 of their units neutralized, 1 captured alive. And when we decoded his field comm log, I saw the note at the top of his transmission schedule. If she's really Falcon Indigo 9, we don't stand a chance. Abort if she engages. They knew, and they were right. Word got around fast. The new guys stopped calling me widow. No one said it out loud, but I saw the shift. The way conversations quieted when I entered the mess hall. The way Private Luhan, barely 20, stared at the old compass on my hip like it was a lightsaber. Even Captain Lal stopped trying to walk ahead of me during briefings. But the strangest reaction came from Grayson. Lieutenant Timothy Grayson, whose shortcut got half a convoy pinned and his Humvee torn open like a sardine can. He wasn't laughing anymore. He showed up at my quarters 2 nights after the Ghost Loop op, holding something wrapped in a dull olive cloth. Sergeant Rios, he started. Permission to speak? I nodded once. He unwrapped the cloth and placed the contents on my work desk. A set of brand new tactical drafting tools, fine line markers, weatherproof map paper, a field compass with night glow etching. Quality stuff. The kind you don't find in quartermaster storage. I figured you'd rather work with real gear than pinned scraps and coffee stirrers, he said, his voice dry with embarrassment. It's not much. I looked down at the tools, then back at him. These are excellent. He scratched the back of his neck. Yeah, well, I thought you deserved better than what we gave you. For a moment, there was something almost human in him. I'd seen young officers humbled before, but rarely like this. He wasn't afraid of me. He was ashamed of himself. You know, I said quietly, if you'd listened when I warned you about Dacker Wash, 3 men wouldn't have fragments in their legs right now. His jaw clenched, but he nodded. I know. And yet, I added, you came back with intel on their fallback route. That helped us take down Ghost Loop. So the score isn't settled, but it's improving. He smiled, faint and awkward. You sound like a field mentor. I've been worse. He chuckled softly. I was taught to lead from the front. Turns out, I should have been learning to listen from the middle. Good, I said, taking the tools and setting them gently into my drawer. Because we don't need figureheads. We need people who understand what they're standing in front of. A week later, I was back in the war room, standing over a fresh terrain layout. We had new data, intercepted chatter, satellite flyovers, and a curious pattern in ground activity across a stretch of desert near the Syrian border. No one else saw it, but I did. I recognized the rhythm of their logistics flow. The delays. The decoys. They were preparing for another op, bigger this time. And they were using one of my own moves. Back when I still worked under blacklight clearance, I developed a pattern called threaded pulse. It involved staging a fake operational bottleneck to lure an opposing force into committing full surveillance attention. Meanwhile, the real movement took place along a supposedly secure corridor used only for medical evac. They were trying it now. Only their version was messy, too linear, lacked the misdirection layering we used to run. Amateurs. I spent the next 18 hours building a counter-op. Not just a block, but a mirror deception. We'd let them believe their fake pulse worked. We'd scramble our data. We'd pretend to rush reinforcements to their decoy zone. And while they celebrated their victory, we'd walk through their real corridor undetected, right into their comms staging area. It worked. Better than we expected. Within 2 days, we had 2 enemy operatives in custody and hard intel on their internal structure. Code names, rank structures, even a partial call log. They weren't just imitating us. They were trained by someone who had been one of us. That changed everything. 2 nights later, Colonel Naved arrived from CENTCOM. Broad-shouldered, quiet, no nonsense. He shook my hand like he already knew what I'd done. His handshake was firm, but his voice was low. You know they're going to make a lot of noise about what you're doing here, Sergeant. I shrugged. They've been making noise since the first time I walked into a strategy room in boots and a braid. He smiled slightly. Fair. He pulled out a worn folder. Not digital. Physical. Inside were pages that hadn't seen daylight in years. You recognize this? I did. It was Recurve 0. The original briefing packet from the Strategic Deception Doctrine I'd helped author. One of only 5 copies ever printed. I thought these were destroyed, I said, tracing the faded emblem on the front. They were. Except one made it into off-record storage. And apparently, into the hands of our current adversary. I looked up, which means someone leaked it. Or someone sold it. That landed like a stone. Selling old doctrine was worse than betrayal. It wasn't just giving up secrets. It was putting blindfolds on our soldiers while handing the enemy a map. He flipped to the last page. They haven't replicated your code structures yet, but they're getting close. We want you to teach a new doctrine. I raised an eyebrow. Recurve 2.0? He grinned. No. Something older. More human. Less digital. Something that works when the satellites fail and the systems crash. I looked out the window of the war room, across the dark perimeter of the base. Beyond those fences, someone out there was trying to outfox a ghost. Fine, I said. But if I'm doing this, I pick the team. And we don't teach them to be me. No. I looked back at him. We teach them to beat me. The first recruit to show up for what I called the real training was Private Lujan. Barely 22. New Jersey accent. Built like a sprinter, with the twitchy attention span of a caffeine addict. He was the first to knock on the metal door of the empty classroom they gave me. No projector, no screen, just folding chairs, a chalkboard, and a long scar across the floor where something explosive had probably landed a decade ago. You're serious about this? He asked, glancing around the empty room. Teaching logistics warfare? I thought that was just some nickname thing. I'm serious, I said, handing him a grease pencil and a blank map. And we don't call it logistics warfare. That's what civilians write on grant proposals. Here, we call it surviving smarter than the enemy wants you to. By the end of the week, I had 8 more. All volunteers. Grayson showed up last. Quietly. No jokes this time. I'll sit in the back, he said. You'll sit in the front, I replied. So your mistakes are harder to repeat. He didn't argue. I started simple. Terrain analysis, route deception, pattern masking. Then we moved into predictive misdirection, feeding false cues through seemingly random decisions. Everything I taught them was grounded in one idea. Make your enemy trust the wrong information. One night, I laid out a scenario. I drew 3 convoy paths on a dusty board. One direct, one roundabout, one inefficient to the point of madness. Which one do you take? I asked the class. Lujan raised his hand. Direct route, if we've got air cover and drone eyes. Grayson frowned. No, you go roundabout. Fewer blind turns, less risk of exposure. Safer. Rodriguez, a quiet corporal who hadn't spoken much all week, shook her head. You take the stupid one. The inefficient path. That's the one they'll ignore. I smiled. Exactly. They were starting to get it. A week later, the war room brought in a real challenge. One of our scout drones picked up an odd convoy movement just outside the Agilent sector, a supply line that didn't match any known pattern. Too fast for civilians, too slow for a strike unit. Traveling on a path that had been cold for months. Intel said it was probably a shadow resupply operation for the group we'd been tracking, the ones mimicking recurve doctrine. They wanted to send a fire team to intercept. I disagreed. Let me take a teaching unit, I told Colonel Naved. We'll use this as a live op real application. Controlled risk. He hesitated. You're suggesting we send rookies into a live op? I'm suggesting we treat them like soldiers instead of cardboard cutouts. Naved looked to Captain Lyle. Lyle shrugged. If she says they're ready, I'd put my paycheck on it. And so we went. The plan was simple. We'd stage a mechanical breakdown on a known route, leak the info, and see if the enemy took the bait. If they did, we'd intercept them mid-ambush, with our own trap waiting. The vehicle was rigged to blow a smoke canister on cue, just enough to mimic overheating. We stopped at 2 clicks short of the Agilent Trail fork. Then we waited. Hour 1, nothing. Hour 2, drone picks up movement on the high ridge, 3 figures with scoped weapons, prone. Hour 3, Rodriguez whispers over comms, they took the bait. Visual on secondary team moving down the eastern slope. I gave the go. Grayson led Team 1 around the rear, hugging the ditch line. Lujan took Team 2 to flank wide. His idea, actually, said it mirrored a training op I'd walked them through using tin cans and a chalk outline. They were smoother than I expected. When the ambushers broke cover and swarmed the broken vehicle, expecting chaos, they found 3 of their own flanked, disarmed, and zip-tied within 90 seconds. I didn't even need to raise my voice. I just watched from a bluff with binoculars. We brought back 2 prisoners. 1 dead. Among the gear we recovered was a tattered field manual. Half English, half Arabic. Most of it was gibberish, bad translations, mismatched diagrams. But on the back cover, scrawled in black ink, was a name. Sable Echo 4. My blood went cold. That was a code name I hadn't heard in 10 years. Not since Riyadh sector. Not since we buried the last version of recurve protocol in a canyon we were never supposed to admit existed. Sable Echo 4 wasn't an alias. It was a person. Someone who used to work alongside me. Someone who should be dead. Sable Echo 4. Just seeing it written again stirred something deep in my gut. Part warning, part memory. Like a scar aching before a storm. Back in 15, Sable was part of my unit. Tactical deception specialist. Brilliant, reckless. A savant when it came to terrain distortion. He could make a village vanish from recon photos using just smoke, cloth, and mirrors. We ran 3 recurve missions together. Then he went rogue. The official story was he died during a deep field op near Kafji, trying to extract a compromised informant. But some of us always suspected otherwise. Now I knew. He hadn't vanished. He'd changed sides. I sat in the interrogation room alone, staring at the younger of the 2 prisoners. He wouldn't talk to the usual intel officers. But when I walked in, he looked up, eyes darting to the compass on my belt. You're the map ghost, he muttered. Is that what they call me now? He nodded. He talks about you. Says you used to erase entire valleys. I leaned forward. Where is Sable? He hesitated. He said if you ever came back, he'd make sure the next battlefield remembers your failure, not your tactics. My hand tightened around the edge of the table. Tell him this. The reason he's still breathing is because I trained him. The kid flinched. He's not running recurve, I added. He's imitating it. And if he keeps using my patterns without understanding them, I'll bury his whole unit with a pencil and a pack of smokes. I stood and walked out before he could respond. Later that night, I unrolled an old field sketch I hadn't looked at in years. My final op with Sable. Back then, I hadn't seen the signs, his need to win the mind games at any cost. Even if it meant breaking protocol. Even if it meant crossing lines we weren't supposed to acknowledge. Now he was rewriting the war. Using our tactics, feeding them to the wrong side. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. If Sable wanted a rematch, he'd get one. But this time, I wasn't coming to win. I was coming to end it. The next morning, I ran a recon overlay on the recovered enemy maps. Sable's fingerprints were all over it, staggered ambush points, alternating supply rhythms, false weak zones. It was classic misdirection. But he'd gotten cocky. Too many decoy routes. Too symmetrical. He wanted us to notice. He was challenging me. I circled the one point that didn't fit, the village of Kurum, long abandoned, half buried by desert storms. No reason to move anything through there, unless you wanted someone specific to follow. He was baiting me. So I bit. Colonel Naved approved a shadow deployment team. No uniforms, minimal gear, no drones, just old-school tracking. I chose 4 from my students: Rodriguez, Lujan, Grayson, and Private Chun, the quiet one who'd spent nights copying old recurve notes by hand. "Why us?" Grayson asked as we packed. "Because you're the ones who still think like students," I said. "Sable expects soldiers. We're giving him something else." We left under cover of night. No motorcade, no radio, just boots and silence. The terrain around Kurum was brutal: jagged rock, loose sand, ancient structures half swallowed by time. But the deeper we moved, the more obvious it became. This wasn't a supply route. It was a theater. We found signs. Old shell casings arranged deliberately, like breadcrumbs. Burned paper with fragments of my old terrain coding system. Even a fake field chronometer buried in the sand. "He's recreating it," I whispered. "Recurve 17. Rodriguez looked around. "Why now?" "Because he knows I'm here," I replied. "And he wants to rewrite the ending." From the top of the ridge, we spotted smoke. Slow, steady, too clean for random fires. He was setting the stage. I turned to the team. "We move at dusk." That night, we crept into the broken shell of an old observatory overlooking Kurum's southern pass. Inside, laid out like an altar, was the final insult, an old operations log from my original team, with all names blacked out except one. Rios. Underneath it. "Come and finish what you started." He wasn't just trying to win. He was rewriting history, and I wasn't about to let him. We moved before dawn. No chatter. No signals. Every step calculated. Chin spotted it first. Faint tracks leading out of the southern ruins. Heavy boots. For pairs. Then a 5th set. Lighter, deliberate. That was Sable. He always walked half a step off formation, just enough to suggest control. I smiled. Still predictable. We followed the prints through a narrow ravine lined with stone walls. Too obvious. I stopped the team with a raised fist. Something wasn't right. "Backtrack," I whispered. "Double time." They didn't question me. 5 minutes later, the canyon behind us erupted. Controlled charges. Enough to bury anyone standing at the center. Grayson exhaled hard. "That would have been us." "No," I said. "That would have been me." We circled east, using a dried-up irrigation path. It ended at the edge of a collapsed mill house, right where I suspected it would. Inside was a radio rig set to a dead frequency and a portable transmitter pulsing on a loop. A signal, just one word repeating every few seconds. "Falcon." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "He really wants your attention. He's trying to get in my head." "Is it working?" I stared at the blinking red light. Only enough to make me careful. By mid-afternoon, we found the real base. Buried beneath a rock outcropping. Low power draw. Tarped camouflage matching desert clay. Chen identified 3 guards. Lujan confirmed motion sensors on the slope. "We hit this loud?" Grayson asked. "No," I said. "We hit it smart. Using mirrors and sun angles, we redirected glare into the nearest sentry's line of sight." While he shielded his eyes, Rodriguez moved. Fast. Silent. 1 down. 2 left. The second folded under tranquilizer. Non-lethal, just as planned. The third? He heard the scuffle and ran, straight into Grayson's fist. Inside the outpost was exactly what I feared. Archived fragments of recurve missions, reconstructed with guesswork and arrogance. But Sable wasn't there. Just a note on the table. Kurum was never the end. "You know where this finishes. I'll be waiting." He'd drawn a compass and circled one point on the edge of an old map. Kandahar. Kandahar. Even saying the name twisted something in my chest. That's where everything unraveled years ago, where the last recurve mission collapsed in radio silence and smoke. Where I left behind my compass, my cover, and a team I couldn't save. Now Sable wanted me back there. He wasn't hiding. He was summoning me. We flew in low, no call signs, just 2 birds and minimal crew. The old airfield was mostly dust and echoes now, but one bunker still stood intact, barely. I recognized it immediately. Bunker 9. It was where I made the decision that ended recurve. Pull the plug, burn the maps, disappear into logistics, and never look back. Now, someone had cleaned it out. Inside were markers, red strings stretched across the walls, matching our movements for the last 6 weeks. Surveillance photos, audio snippets. Someone had been following us since the Agilent op. He knew our every move, Luhan muttered. No, I said. He knew mine. And in the center of the room was a chair. On it sat my old chronometer, cracked, dusty, still set to the time I abandoned the mission that ended his career. Under it, another note. You taught me to erase footprints, but I learned to leave them just deep enough. We didn't wait. Rodriguez secured the perimeter. Chun ran jamming protocols. Grayson found a hard drive tucked behind an old vent. It wasn't encrypted. Inside, footage. Sable, addressing a group in a dimly lit hangar. Preaching tactics. My tactics. They'll always underestimate logistics, he was saying. That's why we'll use it as the weapon. I paused the video. This wasn't just betrayal. It was ideology. He believed this. He'd taken recurve and turned it into a doctrine of vengeance. And the worst part? He wasn't doing it for money or politics. He wanted to prove he was right, and I was wrong. That deception wasn't a tool, but a religion. We left Kandahar with everything we needed. His patterns, his hideouts, his broadcast node locations. I stared at the terrain grid one last time and traced a line across the edge. A pincer route. A mirror trap. Can we end this? Grayson asked. I looked up. Yes, I said. But this time we do it my way. No ghosts. No shadows. I tapped the grid. Just strategy. We launched the operation at dawn. No masks. No secrets. Just one clean directive. Expose. Isolate. Neutralize. This time, we didn't hide. We wanted Sable to see us coming. Our team moved in 3 prongs. Classic convergence with a twist. We let him believe we were repeating recurve 17. Decoy convoys, broadcast chatter, false extraction points. But beneath it all, we moved on foot. Silent. Analog. Old school. Just like I taught them. Sable had fortified himself in the ruins of an old comms tower outside Maruf. High ground with 360 visibility. But he made one mistake. He assumed we were playing his game. He didn't realize we'd changed the rules. The first breach came through a supply tunnel. Chin found it, hidden behind an overgrown crate line and marked with symbols only recurve alumni would recognize. Rodriguez cut the motion sensors using a copper pin and a plastic comb. Luhan slipped through and cleared the lower level in 22 seconds. By the time Sable realized he was surrounded, we were already inside. He stood in the center of the room like a man waiting for a verdict. No gun, no mask. Just the same look he wore the day he vanished. Smug, unreadable. I wondered how long it would take, he said. I stepped forward. You dragged 8 years of ghosts into the light for this. No, he replied. I did it to prove your doctrine was flawed. You buried it. I perfected it. You turned it into a weapon. It always was. You were just afraid to use it. I shook my head. No, I respected it. You turned it into a mirror and got lost in your own reflection. He looked tired suddenly. The weight of years, of betrayal, of being wrong in the worst way. You came here to kill me? I looked to my team. No, I said. I came here to end you. Rodriguez handed me the signal node, his last working transmitter. I crushed it underfoot. We're cutting you out of the game. No stories. No martyrdom. You disappear now, completely. For the first time, Sable looked afraid. After the extraction, CENTCOM issued a quiet report. Unidentified hostile strategist neutralized. Intelligence assets secured. No friendly casualties. The rest stayed off record. Rodriguez got a commendation. Chin was invited to a special training program. Luhan. Well, he finally stopped twitching. Grayson? He requested transfer to teaching. Said he wanted to show the next batch of lieutenants how to listen before speaking. And me? I went back to the board. Back to maps. To terrain markers and coded pencils. But now, when I walk into the mess, people don't glance away. They nod. Respectfully. Sometimes they ask questions. Sometimes they sit with me just to listen. Not because I tell war stories. I don't. But because they know now. I wasn't a myth. I was the reason some myths never had to be written. And every now and then, someone mentions a name from the old days. Sable, Echo units, the compass ghost. And I just smile. Not the kind of smile that invites more questions. The kind that says, some of us are still watching, still planning, still winning wars you'll never hear about. In silence. As always.